Producer Rick McCallum spoke about Star Wars Underworld, George Lucas's unproduced TV series, saying, "I think we had over 60 scripts, like third draft scripts. These were dark. They were sexy. They were violent. They were absolutely wonderful, complicated, challenging scripts. It would have blown up the whole Star Wars universe, and Disney would have definitely never offered George to buy the franchise." Well, considering what Disney's done with Star Wars, I wouldn't be so sure about that. "13 years after George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, we're getting more details about his planned TV series, Star Wars Underworld. It would have been the first big-budget live-action Star Wars series. According to people involved in the project, Lucas brought in dozens of writers from around the world to hash out the scripts. Producer Ronald Moore spoke about this on Katie Sackhoff's podcast.
What he wanted to do is he wanted to gather a group of writers together, kind of an international group of writers, and he would bring us together up at Skywalker Ranch for like a long weekend. Sit with George in a conference room at Skywalker Ranch and break these stories. And then we would go off for like another 6 weeks out by ourselves, write the scripts, then regather, talk about notes, do another group of scripts.
Moore said this went on for about a year, and then Lucas eventually called it and planned on shooting the scripts on his own dime, completing all the episodes for the first season. The idea was to then take this to a network as is, basically take it or leave it. No notes, no changes. Remember, this would have been a few years before Lucas sold Lucasfilm, so sometime around 2009. Lucas planned for at least 100 episodes for the series. The average show at the time was still about 13 to 26 episodes. Would a TV network have taken the show with those conditions? I don't think any network would have committed to something on this scale without having any input into the final product. McCallum said around 2009 that each episode would cost about $4 million, but he recently said that each episode would have been bigger than the films, and the lowest they would have cost was $40 million per episode. That would have been the most expensive show at the time. Even today, $40 million per episode is a lot, although with current technology, Lucas probably could have made the show at a lower cost. But keep in mind that Lucas also planned to make another movie trilogy during that time. That's a lot of money and time invested, and he was pushing 70 back then. That would have been rough. That said, getting scripts to the third draft stage means they're basically ready to shoot, so technically there's nothing stopping Disney from moving forward with the series right now. The question is, what was the series about? It was supposed to be set on Coruscant, taking place between Episode 3 and Episode 4, covering the rise of the Empire and the burgeoning rebellion. It would have focused on lesser characters, mostly those involved with criminal organizations, with mentions of the main characters here and there. Some details went public over the years, like LucasArts developer Cory Barlog saying that he read scripts about the Emperor, where it's revealed that Palpatine got turned out by some female gangster, probably playing into Palpatine's turn to the dark side. Ronald Moore mentioned that there was a potential Darth Vader appearance, with him stepping in to stop an uprising on Coruscant. It looks like this was a serious undertaking, because Lucas canceled other projects set during that time involving characters like Boba Fett and Leia, so those projects wouldn't contradict the Underworld series. Based on what I could find, it sounds like they were all set to move forward, but for the budget. So Lucas put the series on hold in 2010, and 2 years later, he sold Lucasfilm to Disney. Ironically, had he waited a few years, the technology would have been there where he could do something on a cinematic scale without breaking the bank. But like I mentioned before, by that point he'd be in his 70s, and he's mentioned in interviews that he wanted to raise his daughter, so he sold the company instead of keeping it and letting someone else take the lead. In the long run, he probably should have kept Lucasfilm and put someone like Dave Filoni in charge. I understand his decision, especially with the $4 billion offered, but the trade-off from a storytelling perspective hasn't really worked out. Disney did the impossible and actually made people praise the prequels. That is a feat. If I told anybody back in 2010 they'd be praising those movies, they'd have laughed me right out the room. That's how bad Disney Star Wars has been. But like I said before, there's nothing stopping Disney from using Underworld scripts and ideas, and that might have happened. IndieWire wrote about this following McCallum recently talking about the series. Quote, "It's believed that elements of Underworld may have popped up into Disney properties that have been produced since, and we just haven't known it. We do know Rogue One was a project pitched by VFX whiz John Knoll at Lucasfilm pre-Disney. Might it have essentially been planned to be an elaborate Underworld installment? Yahoo Entertainment claimed it was. Jermaine Lucet at Slashfilm said Underworld would have explored Han Solo's origins. might that have morphed into Solo, a Star Wars story? Even the idea of focusing on the criminal underworld is something Underworld had in common with The Mandalorian, while the Bad Batch animated series and Andor went on to explore the same time period Underworld ostensibly would have. Assuming this is true, my question is how much of the original ideas made it into the final product? Rogue One and Andor are the closest to a darker take on Star Wars that I could see George Lucas approving. They do feel the most Star Wars of the Disney properties. But then looking at what happened with Solo and how that didn't get over, that makes me question whether a Sopranos-style Star Wars show would have worked. The appeal of Star Wars isn't the bounty hunters and criminals, it's the action and adventure, the rebellion, the Jedi, and the space battles. It can work. The Mandalorian, Andor, and Skeleton Crew all play into the Underworld theme, and they're good shows, but the criminal element isn't the focus of each series. I assume the Book of Boba Fett touched on this too, but I haven't watched the show. In a recent interview, McCullough said Underworld not getting made is one of the greatest disappointments of our life. I don't know about that, but I would like to see what they had planned. They went far into the process, not just scripts, but concept art and screen tests. I'd love to see that stuff. It'd be even better if Disney produced some of it. They don't even have to film it. They could adapt it into a comic book series or novels. The way people involved with the series talk about it makes it sound really cool and interesting. And man, could we use some cool, interesting Star Wars stories right about now. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.